This hearing of the Committee on Foreign Affairs will come to order. We'll ask all members to take their seats at this time. Today, we welcome Ambassador Shaw, Administrator of the U.S. Agency for International Development, who is responsible for managing roughly 60% of the total $32 billion foreign operations budget. A common refrain is that foreign aid accounts for less than 1% of the federal budget. As we'll hear, aid programs that are effectively executed can help create more stable societies, can speed economic growth, and advance U.S. national security interests. Still, the bar for justifying this spending must be high given our unacceptable deficit. Of course, the principal goal of U.S. foreign assistance must be to get the United States eventually out of the business of foreign assistance, because to succeed, developing nations must unlock their own growth potential. To that end, I am pleased that the Administration is committed to the goals of the Electrify Africa Act, bipartisan legislation which recently passed this committee. Targeted investments in power generation can help Africans attract foreign investment and produce the goods to grow their economies. We look forward to continuing to work with USAID on this important initiative. I am encouraged by the Administration's commitment and by the Administrator's commitment to a new model of development that focuses on transparency. It focuses on science and innovation and engagement with the private sector. Dr. Shaw has shown that he's not afraid of upsetting the status quo. I am also pleased that this budget builds upon recent gains in the international food aid reform effort. Last year, I worked closely with the ranking member, Mr. Elliot Engel of New York, and Representatives Marino and Bass and USAID on a broad coalition, along with a broad coalition of advocacy groups, and ultimately we succeeded in freeing up an additional $100 million from inefficient purchase and shipping regulations so we can strengthen food markets, promote greater self-sufficiency, and save more lives more quickly and for less money. I have seen firsthand the need for a quick and efficient food aid program, having recently visited Tacloban in the Philippines, which of course was ravaged by the typhoon that struck that island. Unfortunately, USAID will have no shortage of challenges ahead. Needs in Syria and the region are growing. Humanitarian space there is shrinking. U.S. investments in Afghanistan and Pakistan must contend with debilitating corruption and waste, and the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan will only place aid at greater risk. I'm disappointed that the Administration's request for Egypt failed once again to prioritize true economic reforms, including a focus on the clear title to property and property title transfer that would enable entrepreneurs to enter the formal economy, as explained to us in our committee here that we had on the focus of the importance of aid reform there. USAID programs in Haiti appear to be poorly planned and largely unsustainable, and this committee passed good oversight legislation aimed at improving conditions and the value of our work on that troubled island. There are concerns about the Administration's lack of focus on democracy assistance. Needless to say, your challenges are great. Your challenges are growing every day. Your task is compounded by the fact that there are no quick fixes in your line of work. That would be the case even if you did not have to contend with a wave of extremism affecting many countries. With that in mind, we should be looking to maximize every resource at our disposal, and this includes better leveraging the support and investment of the many diaspora communities throughout the U.S. that are active in the same regions that you are. I look forward to working with you, Administrator Shaw, to address these pressing concerns while advancing our strategic goals and promoting economic growth and graduating more countries from foreign aid. And I will now turn to Ranking Member Elliott Engel from New York for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you for holding this important hearing. Dr. Shah, thank you for your service and for being here today to review the administration's foreign assistance budget request for fiscal year 2015. I'd like to begin by reminding my colleagues that the international affairs budget as a whole is only about 1% of the entire federal budget, and the foreign assistance funding that we will discuss today is only a fraction of that amount. I have constantly been saying that we should have more money in the budget for foreign aid. The American public thinks that we spend about 15% of our budget on foreign aid, and in reality it's just under 1%. Having said that, though, it's important that every tax dollar is spent wisely, and one of the key responsibilities of this committee is to conduct effective oversight of USAID, the State Department, and other foreign affairs agencies. But let's not fool ourselves into believing that we can solve our larger budget issues by slashing foreign aid. That's certainly not the case. So what do we get for that tiny slice of the budget that we spend on foreign assistance? It's easy. We promote American leadership around the world. We support allies in need. We create new markets for American goods and generate jobs here at home. We help impoverished men, women, and children suffering from hunger and disease. We prevent wars before they happen. And through all of these activities, we make a critical investment in our own security. Dr. Shah, I'd like to commend you personally for your leadership on so many important issues. You and I have worked very closely together, and I must say that I am very impressed with your intellect, your hard work, your dedication, and your good heart. The administration has made some very tough decisions on funding priorities, and I am impressed by USAID's ability to accomplish so much on such a limited budget. As we have discussed, I'm disappointed by the proposed cuts to the bilateral tuberculosis program and to humanitarian accounts. The United States has helped the world make tremendous gains in childhood survival, maternal health, and the fight against tuberculosis, and I fear that reductions in these areas will make it difficult to sustain the progress we've made. Likewise, I'm concerned that we will need more funding for humanitarian relief in the coming fiscal year, not less, to deal with famine and crises in South Sudan, the Central African Republic, and other countries. On food aid, I am pleased that the budget request builds on the modest gains we made in the Farm Bill by seeking additional flexibility that will allow USAID to reach about 2 million more people each year. And Dr. Shah, you and I have had extensive discussions about why there needs to be food aid reform. We can get more food aid to people faster and cheaper, and to me, that's the bottom line. And thank you for your leadership on that as well, because we have piggybacked on your proposals, the Chairman and I, and have made great progress in letting people know that this has to be done. I'm concerned that the gains we've made on food security will be imperiled unless we mount an aggressive effort to combat the effects of climate change. This budget would help developing countries reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and help vulnerable populations deal with the impacts of global warming. Dr. Shah, your signature initiatives emphasize public-private partnerships and harnessing innovation. Your latest effort, launched just weeks ago, is the U.S. Global Development Lab. I have high hopes for this initiative and would like you to describe some of the lab's key products and innovations. I'm particularly impressed by the invention of the Pratt pouch, which effectively prevents the transmission of HIV from mother to child. It costs only 9 cents per pouch, can be used anywhere, and will make a big difference in our fight to create an AIDS-free generation. With regard to Haiti, this committee has expanded oversight of U.S. assistance provided to that country since the devastating 2010 earthquake. I am pleased that U.S. reconstruction aid to Haiti has accelerated, and I hope that USAID will focus more intensely on ensuring that our assistance to Haiti encourages investment in the country. On Cuba, I have closely followed the recent press reports about our democracy assistance programs and hope you will use this opportunity to discuss the purpose and effectiveness of these programs. In Africa, USAID is leading the Power Africa initiative, which will increase access to affordable electricity for hundreds of millions of people in sub-Saharan Africa. This will help fuel greater economic growth and development across the continent. I hope that the Electrify Africa Act, legislation that Chairman Royce and I authored, will bolster your efforts and exchange the life of this promising program. In Afghanistan and Pakistan, the U.S. has spent billions of dollars on roads, agriculture, rule of law, and capacity building. I hope you will focus on how USAID plans to monitor projects in Afghanistan after the withdrawal of all U.S. combat troops at the end of 2014 and the continuing value of our aid to Pakistan. On Ukraine, the President recently signed into law our bipartisan legislation to provide additional assistance with a focus on strengthening civil society, combating corruption, promoting energy efficiency and diversification, and preparing the country for democratic elections. USAID will be a lead agency in implementing this assistance, and I look forward to hearing your views and how best to manage these programs. I might add that the Chairman and I are leading a trip to Ukraine in a very, very short time. Finally, I regret that the budget request plans for a long road ahead in Syria. More than 3 years after the start of this horrendous conflict, the Assad regime continues to commit atrocities with impunity. The country has become a magnet for extremists, and the humanitarian crisis gets worse with each passing day. I believe we should do more to help bring this conflict to an end and relieve the immense suffering of the Syrian people. So, Dr. Shah, I'd like to thank you again for being here, and I look forward to your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. This morning we are joined by Rajiv Shah, the Administrator of USAID. Dr. Shah is the 16th Administrator of USAID, and previously he served as Undersecretary of Research, Education, and Economics at USAID, and as Chief Scientist at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And we welcome him back to the committee. Without objection, the witness's full prepared statement will be made part of the record. Members here will have 5 calendar days to submit any statements or questions or extraneous material for the record. And we will ask Administrator Shah, if you would, please summarize your remarks. Administrator Shah.
Thank you, Chairman Royce, and thank you, Ranking Member Engel, and to all of the members of the committee. I am pleased and honored to be here to present a justification for President Obama's FY2015 request for U.S. aid and for development assistance around the world. As the President has said on numerous occasions, our investments in development, in health, in humanitarian affairs, and in supporting civil society and democratic governance are a critical part of our own national security strategy. I first want to start by just saying thank you to all of the members of the committee, and in particular the chair and the ranking member. Your support over the last years has helped us rebuild our staffing, rebuild our capacity to manage budgets, rebuild our policy leadership at USAID. You've helped us expand our partner base to include local organizations around the world, private companies, civil society organizations, and NGOs. You've helped us to prioritize science and technology as a core driver of how America can help accelerate the fight to end extreme poverty, and supported the launch last week of the U.S. Global Development Lab, designed to bring universities, scientists, businesses, and young people all together to literally invent new tools and technologies that can accelerate the fight against disease, hunger, and poverty. And you've supported our efforts to aggressively transform the way we evaluate our programs, so that today all of our major programs are evaluated by third parties, and those evaluations are conducted at a high level of quality and made public in full form. We have tried to pursue a new model of development that expands the partnership base and brings innovation and technology to the task of ending extreme poverty. I think we've seen in many instances the success of this effort. The President's Feed the Future program, which operates in 19 countries, now reaches 7 million small-scale farmers each year, helping to move 12.5 million children out of a condition of chronic hunger and malnutrition. This takes place in partnership with the private sector, who has made nearly $4 billion of private investment commitments alongside U.S. investment, and this is generating concrete, specific results that are reducing extreme poverty in some of the most impoverished countries in the world. In child survival, this budget calls for a $2.7 billion commitment to a topic where America has traditionally led. From 1990 to today, we effectively have helped save 5 million child lives every year through our collective efforts with partners. We've now set for ourselves an ambitious goal of taking down from 6.6 million to near elimination the remaining number of children who die every year unnecessarily. And we know with your ongoing and commitment and support, we can achieve that objective. Similar outcomes are being seen in education, in water, and in energy, where we really value the leadership presented by the committee with respect to the Electrify Africa bill. In disaster assistance, we've had an unfortunately extraordinarily active year. The response in the Philippines to Typhoon Haiyan has been seen as a global best practice, and I just gathered with Secretary Hagel and the ASEAN defense ministers to learn from that example. One of the reasons that was so successful was the ability to use flexibly purchased food locally to ensure that we could quickly and efficiently meet the needs of children who otherwise would have suffered from hunger, and quickly scale up a program to reach 3 million people in the context of a natural disaster. We look forward to further discussions and support on the President's proposal to take food aid reform forward with a request for 25% flexibility in the program. We know that we're currently facing 3 level 3 emergencies around the world: Syria and its neighbors, the Central African Republic, and South Sudan. Given the pressures that will place, we will appreciate opportunities to work with the committee to continue to optimize our response. We do support democratic governance, civil society, and human rights throughout the world in our programs. One manifestation of that was our support for the Afghan elections this past weekend, which I believe defied expectations in terms of turnout, and in particular, the turnout of women in the context of that vote. We look forward to discussing our democratic governance programs in greater detail. And I'd like to conclude just by noting that people often tell me that foreign assistance is difficult to justify politically. And I know that each of you spend time with your constituents and in your communities doing that work. I want to thank you for that. I really believe that America stands at a unique time in our history when it comes to our efforts to address global poverty. Really, for the first time, we can credibly suggest that it's possible to end extreme poverty, dollar-a-day poverty, within the next 2 decades. And it will require continued support from this committee, from businesses, from scientists, from members of the faith community, from NGOs and civil society and governments around the world to achieve that goal. And we appreciate your support to that end. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Administrator Shaw. I wanted to start with a few questions here. One on land grabbing and the lack of enforceable property rights and title transfer in developing nations. And that acts as a significant barrier to sustainable developments and to long-term growth. And we have seen this up close in terms of the results in Tunisia and in Egypt. We've seen the shock waves created. It's a source of tremendous political and social instability. In December, there was an insightful article, Lessons from the Past, Securing Land Rights in the Wake of Typhoon Haiyan. And the article quoted a USAID official saying that unequal access to land is a central issue that cuts across both rural and urban sectors in the Philippines. Unequal access to land is a significant issue that occurs worldwide. We know of significant land grabbing that is occurring and has occurred for some years now in Cambodia and in China and in Peru. Administrator Shaw, what is USAID doing to urge the government of the Philippines to address the issue of land grabbing? And most importantly, what about the rampant corruption that at a local level that allows land grabbing to occur? I have heard over and over again that the Philippines is making progress on fighting corruption. However, even Philippine anti-corruption officials will admit that corruption in this area, in terms of land grabbing, that is an ongoing tragedy. With all of the assistance funding that we're providing to Manila, isn't it true and isn't it time that USAID and the administration focus on this issue given what's at stake? And I've asked for 3 years now. I've tried to work to make this a priority with USAID. I've received emphatic support verbally. 3 years later, after returning, I see no progress. So will this be the year where we finally make a difference?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It will. We believe this is a critical issue. As I have seen personally in efforts where I handed out land titles to Colombian farmers who were returning to their farms after conflict that has lasted, as you know, decades, the power of respecting property rights, providing title, giving people the basis to seek financing to invest in their own future is an extraordinarily powerful strategy to reduce poverty and extreme poverty. In the Philippines, 46% of the 24.2 million parcels are titled, and even amongst those, a high degree of corruption and ineffective respect for those titles hamper the ability of many poor families to secure their future. I'm thrilled that we've been working together on this. I want to say thank you for your specific visits to the country and work with our program. We can commit today to use FY2014 resources to engage an effort that will help both work with the government on corruption issues, enforcement, community policing, and support for their land management office, as well as with local communities to help address this challenge.
Thank you. The other question I was going to ask you is, last week this committee held a hearing on women and education, followed by a markup on our legislation, the Malala Yousafzai Scholarship Act. And our debate, I think, drove home a very important point, and that is education is a very powerful tool that can advance U.S. national security interests while creating more stable societies. For many years now, I've expressed concerns about the rise of these Deobandi schools. I've made 3 trips to Pakistan to urge the government there to close them. They really prey upon the disenfranchised, and they're breeding radicalism. And I have visited schools that have later been destroyed by the Taliban up in the northwest frontier. I think that the Pakistani-American community here in the United States, based on my work with them, they see how we can better coordinate efforts to promote education and private sector growth in Pakistan. They have a very real interest in making certain that this radicalization is offset and that the education of girls is advanced. What can be done to better leverage and support investments by the Pakistani diaspora in education and in private sector development in Pakistan? And how are you safeguarding U.S. assistance against corruption inside Pakistan?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the leadership the committee's shown, especially in taking forward the legacy that Malala Yousafzai has created by using her voice and the power of her moral example to advocate for this issue. USAID has supported a large-scale program in Pakistan on education with a specific focus on girls and early grade learning and literacy outcomes. We target reaching 3.2 million children. We have helped to reconstruct more than 1,400 schools. We've worked with federal and provincial governments in a number of the states to make sure that this issue is a priority. And we've engaged on teacher training, curricula and standards, and perhaps most importantly, the measuring of literacy outcomes through the early grade reading assessment, which USAID has pioneered and tested. We look forward to working with the Pakistani-American community on this. We have new mechanisms to allow us to do that, and I think that ability to engage the diaspora community, which is something we've enhanced over the last several years, would be quite welcome to take this program to an even greater level of effectiveness.
Thank you, Administrator Shaw. We will turn now to Mr. Elliott Engel of New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 4 questions, so I'm going to try to do it quickly. First one is about something I mentioned in my opening statement, that's tuberculosis. It's usually treatable, as you know, with a course of inexpensive drugs, but it's still the leading curable infectious killer in the world, claiming 1.3 million lives per year. And the emergence of multi-drug resistant and extensively drug-resistant TB strains really pose a direct threat to the public health of the U.S. This year's budget request for USAID's tuberculosis program proposes a $45 million cut from FY2014's appropriated level of $236 million. So at a time of tight budgets for PEPFAR and the Global Fund, can you elaborate on how USAID's tuberculosis program could absorb a cut of this magnitude and still carry out its vital mission?
Thank you. I appreciate your leadership on tuberculosis. I think it's been very, very important, and that's part of why we've seen a 50% reduction in TB mortality, and TB is projected to achieve its Millennium Development Goal target. We're very concerned about multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, which largely has emerged in places like India, South Africa, China, Brazil, and Russia. And I'd note a few things. The first is, in a difficult budget environment, we've had to make some trade-offs. But what we've tried to do here is recognize we have 3 pots of funding for TB: the USAID bilateral program, the $180+ million in PEPFAR that goes to TB, and the Global Fund commitment, which has gone up over the last several years, and where the United States recently encouraged and voted for Global Fund spending more of its resources, I think 14 to 18%, on tuberculosis in particular. So in aggregate, I think the United States' commitment to tuberculosis remains at a consistent and strong level. Second, we are engaging more in partnerships, especially in countries that can afford to pay for much of the response but require some technical partnership with us. I saw this specifically transpire in India, where they're very focused on MDR and what they call XDR TB. And third, we look forward to working with you to continue to make sure we're optimizing our program. I think USAID has had a very strong history of supporting the World Health Organization, CDC, and local country governments around the world to take more of their own domestic responsibility for this issue.
Thank you. Let me ask you a couple of Middle East questions. The first one on Syria. The UN Security Council has unanimously approved resolution which demands all parties, particularly the Syrian authorities, promptly allow rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian access for UN humanitarian agencies and their implementations. Assad, there's all kinds of questions about the leader of Syria, Assad, stealing the food, stealing the aid, not letting it go to rebel areas that need the aid. Can you just give us a quick overview about Syria humanitarian aid?
Thank you, and as you know, and as members of the committee have really worked hard to highlight, this is an extraordinary crisis with 9.5 million people in need inside of Syria and 2.5 million refugees now, especially many in Jordan and Lebanon, that are really taxing those countries' ability to sustain social services for those mostly young Syrian refugees. The United States is proud of the fact that our aid and assistance, more than $1.7 billion over the last few years, has reached and continues to reach more than 4 million people inside of Syria. More so than any other country, we reach affected communities even in opposition areas. Surgeons and doctors that we support have provided more than 250,000 surgeries, every one of them heroic in the context of being targeted and in many cases having staff lose their lives. We continue to provide support, but I want to say just a few things. One is the UN Security Council resolution was reviewed by Valerie Amos just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and she reported to the Security Council that in fact the Assad regime had not lived up to the terms of the Security Council resolution in terms of greatly expanding access. Second, we know there are specific pockets and communities inside of Syria, roughly 220,000 people, that are held in besieged areas where literally the preventing food and water from reaching them is used as a tactic of war. And that is in violation of every basic humanitarian principle, including how war should be conducted. So in this context, this is an extraordinarily difficult problem. The committee's work and your personal efforts to allow for more flexibility in food assistance have allowed us to reach so many more beneficiaries, women and children, especially in Jordan and Lebanon, that we simply couldn't truck American food to, but now they get a card that has the USAID logo on it. It says, "From the American People," and our humanitarian leader, Nancy Lindborg, just sat with a group of women in Amman who said, "Thank you so much for this card. It is what gives us dignity and keeps us going." That is only happening because you have fought for greater flexibility in food aid and food assistance, and I just want to say thank you for your leadership.
Well, thank you. I'm just wondering if quickly I can stay in the Middle East and ask you a quick question about the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. The administration's requested over $400 million in FY2015 funds for the Palestinian Authority, and last week, Palestinian President Abbas announced the Palestinians would be joining 15 international conventions, seemingly in violation of their obligations under the agreement to negotiate. Now they're calling for several new preconditions to talks, making us doubt their good faith in the negotiations. The only pathway to a Palestinian state and a sustainable peace between Israel and the Palestinians is through a negotiated settlement, not a unilateral declaration by the Palestinian Authority. So let me just simply say, how will our assistance strategy change if the Palestinians pursue a unilateral path?
Well, let me just say, Secretary Kerry has, I think, very ably articulated the administration's position and the extraordinary leadership he has taken to support negotiations and continues to moving forward. We play a part at the Secretary's direction of providing support in the West Bank, as you've noted. None of the agreements that were signed last week endanger at this point that support right now. But we will be looking very carefully to see how this transpires, coordinating our efforts. And I'll just say I was with Secretary Kerry in Bethlehem a few months ago when we launched a high-impact infrastructure initiative in the West Bank. And I think the American people should take some pride in the fact that our assistance in the region helps to maintain stability and create some opportunities for dialogue and negotiation. But the Secretary, of course, went into this in much more detail yesterday, and I'll defer to his comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. We now go to Eliana Ross-Leitonen, the Chairman Emeritus of this committee, and from Florida.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Shaw. I would like to give you an opportunity to clarify some press reports about the Cuba Twitter program. First, was the program covert and top secret?
No.
Second, does USAID implement similar programs aimed at increasing the free flow of information throughout the world in closed societies?
We support civil society, yes.
Third, will USAID remain committed to reaching out to people suffering under closed societies and dictatorships?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. So, contrary to what the media have reported, the democracy programs for Cuba are transparent. They are open. The Cuba Democracy Program, with its $20 million price tag, in fact, is one of the most scrutinized programs in our foreign aid portfolio. The real question here is, why does the press and some in our congressional family demonize these programs? The Freedom House has a report called Freedom on the Net, and this report lists Cuba as the world's second worst violator on internet freedom. Only Iran is worse. Thus, Cuba is worse than countries like Syria, Bahrain, Burma, Belarus, where no one in Congress seems to have a problem promoting internet freedom in those countries. So why not Cuba? Some may have a political agenda geared toward supporting the Castro dictatorship instead of supporting the people of Cuba and wish to put an end to these successful programs. Many of us on this committee have spent a lot of time and energy supporting human rights in Russia, in Vietnam, in Egypt, in Tunisia, Ukraine, Iran, Syria. So why not Cuba? Why does our foreign policy agenda discriminate against the freedom-seeking people in the Western Hemisphere? As you know, Dr. Shaw, and I congratulate you for being so sensitive to this, the Cuban people have been suffering under the Castro dictatorship for more than 50 years, not because of U.S. policy, but because the Castro brothers continue to harass, to imprison, to torture, to kill the opposition. I'm a political refugee because my family emigrated to the United States when I was 8 years old. We were seeking democracy. And I remember driving through Havana and my father telling me, duck down, because gunshots were being fired all around us. And my dear friend, Albio Sierras, he was 11 years old when his family came here from Cuba, and he can also share some of these heartbreaking stories. But these tragedies continue today in the daily lives of the people of Cuba. One pro-democracy leader is named, as you know, Dr. Shaw, Jorge Luis Garcia Perez, known by his nickname Antunes. He was in Castro's jail over 17 years. Now that he is freed from one jail to a bigger jail that is Cuba, he continues to fight for democracy and for respect for human rights. In fact, just 2 months ago, Antunes risked his life and went on a hunger strike with no food and no liquids. Why? All for the sake of freedom. Berta Soler, another human rights advocate, she's a leader of an organization called Las Damas de Blanco, the Ladies in White. These brave women are comprised of the moms, the sisters, the friends, the relatives of political prisoners, and they march every Sunday in peace to Mass, wearing all white, calling for freedom. They march in peace, Mr. Chairman, as you know, with the gladiolos in their hands. You've spoken about them. And these women are met with violence, their beatings, imprisonment. These pro-democracy advocates are the faces of the people that you, under your leadership in USAID, has been trying to help with these programs. Thank you for that, Dr. Shaw. And U.S. citizen Alan Gross, as we know, is on his 5th year of being unjustly incarcerated in Cuba and has begun a hunger strike. According to the Cuban Commission for Human Rights and National Reconciliation, there were over 1,000 arbitrary and politically motivated arrests in Cuba just 2 months ago, in February. In 1 month, over 1,000 arrests. Does this sound like paradise? If this was happening in any other country in the world, the U.S. would be engaged. So why should Cuba be an exception? There's no independent press in Cuba. There's complete control over the Cuban airwaves and programming on television and the press to promote the political propaganda spewed by this dictatorship. That is why our State Department, and that's why you, Dr. Shaw, with USAID democracy programs in Cuba, are so important to offer the other side of the story, the side that promotes American values, God-given values like freedom, justice, and liberty. And I recognize that some in Congress don't think that Cuba is of national significance, but they are wrong, and this issue goes well beyond Cuba. This issue that we're debating, Mr. Chairman, is whether or not USAID should be taking steps to promote human rights, the rule of law, and democratic governance throughout the world, and I say yes. Thank you, Dr. Shaw. Thank you, USAID. This is the cornerstone of our foreign policy to promote democratic ideals. And I'm sorry I'm out of time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Eliana. We now go to Gregory Meeks of New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Shaw, for your outstanding job in leading USAID. I'm going to try to do quickly, and I guess if you could just write them down, 4 questions, and hopefully you'll get a chance to answer them. If not, then we'll talk later. But first, you know, USAID plays a significant role in providing trade-related assistance. And Congress has appropriated funds for this purpose, specifically targeting certain countries with which we have trade agreements. Now, I'm a strong supporter of trade capacity building. So I would like to know more about what USAID is doing to enhance trade capacity abroad and what else you think Congress can do to help. That's question number 1. Number 2, as indicated, I also applaud what the agency has done in progress in dispersing aid funding in Haiti. However, recently the Congressional Black Caucus was at the UN, and we were told that there could be a serious outbreak of cholera, and that there's a cholera emergency in Haiti. And so I want to know, do you think that is that so? Is it under control, and what we can do there? Third, of course, I am also concerned in regards to funding in Colombia, a great ally of ours, but particularly there seems to be a real situation in Buenaventura, which is Colombia's largest port and is a center of its African Colombian population, where over 500,000 inhabitants, and over 90% of them are black, and they're mired in a crime and poverty, and over 80% live below the poverty line, 30% are unemployed, and virtually none have access to reliable supplies of electricity, water, even basic road infrastructure. And so this violence that's going on, and I know as we phase out of Plan Colombia, et cetera, but we want to make sure that we are able to address underlying social problems, so if there's anything that's being, what we're doing there. And finally, on the lines of what Ranking Member Elliott Engel had asked, he talked especially about tuberculosis, but thanks in a huge part to U.S. investments in global health, the world has cut by 50% the number of children who die before age 5 from whether it's pneumonia or malaria or tuberculosis, the leading killers of children worldwide. We're on the verge of some exciting breakthroughs and life-saving potential. For example, I know that USAID's new tools to prevent and treat malaria, but there's budget controls and constraints, et cetera. So I was wondering how you would prioritize these global health needs to ensure we are fulfilling the gaps on current global health needs, especially as it relates to helping children.
Thank you, Mr. Congressman, and I just want to say thank you for your personal engagement and leadership on so many of these issues as they pertain to so many important parts of the world, and on behalf of really the world's most vulnerable. With respect to trade assistance and capacity building, the FY15 request includes $170 million for precisely that activity. In addition to that, we have our Feed the Future program, which is operational in 19 countries, really focuses on improving the capacity of local businesses to engage in particular regional agricultural trade. And I would just note that we've done careful evaluations of programs like the East Africa Trade Hub that have found that our efforts have helped to bring down customs blockages and transshipments across borders, have accelerated the time and efficiency of regional trade in particular, and have generated sort of $40 of economic value for every dollar we've invested in trade capacity building. So what Congress can do is support strongly the development assistance account, which is part of the budget and is under a lot of pressure. Second, with respect to Haiti, we have a strong community-based public health program that's focused on all-cause child mortality and will include and does already include an integrated effort with the UN to address cholera. I'd point out that right now the fatality rate is under 1%, which meets the standards and goals the UN has set. But we're working all the time to make sure that cholera is managed, and also as we make those investments, that the clinics that are in rural communities are well stocked and suited to serve all children, whatever the cause of disease might be. And that building that supply chain and that health systems approach has been critical to our efforts to bring down child mortality in Haiti, which have been successful over the last few years. Third, with respect to Afro-Colombian populations in Colombia, I personally had a chance to meet with our partners, and we're trying to work with about 100 businesses, train thousands of Afro-Colombian youth, and then get them placed in jobs. And that effort has been very successful. We expect to place 80% of the 4,500 trainees in 2014 and reaching 10,000 by 2016. And we have a lot of support from business leaders there, and it's part of our new approach to public-private partnerships. And finally, with respect to global health, I just want to say thank you. Your raising that issue is so critical. America has a chance right now to lead the charge to end child death. And it'll take a 2-decade commitment from this committee. It will take resources, and we've produced an FY15 request that has a small increase over the FY14 request. And it requires a new concerted business-like approach in the 24 countries that account for just over 70% of the 6.6 million kids who die. And we will be unveiling an investment plan for those 24 countries with a group of other partners later in June. So we thank you for your support, and I think this is one area where America can accomplish something in partnership with others that is truly extraordinary.
We go now to Mr. Chris Smith, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Africa and Global Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Shaw, welcome, and thank you for your leadership. Let me ask you a few questions, and I do have some I'd like to submit for the record. You know, the focus on child survival is an extraordinarily important one. The First Amendment I offered as a member of this committee in 1982, more than 30 years ago, was to reauthorize and expand and double the amount of money for child survival. It passed, became law, and we've been doing, as a country, taking the lead through various administrations, oral rehydration therapy, nutrition, vaccines, and the like. But I am concerned. I was part of a roundtable discussion with 7 African First Ladies back in 2010, and it focused on the first 1,000 days of life from the moment of conception, their title, very important title and a very important initiative. As we all know, and you know it better than anyone, I think, UNICEF estimates that 1 in 4 children worldwide are stunted due to lack of adequate nutrition. Children who are chronically undernourished as unborn children up to their 2nd birthday have impaired immune systems that are incapable of protecting them against life-threatening ailments such as pneumonia and malaria. Mothers who are malnourished as girls are 40% more likely to die during childbirth, experience debilitating complications like obstetric fistula, and deliver children who perish before reaching the age of 5. We are still waiting for the Nutrition Initiative guidelines, and I know they're in the works. The sooner the better. How do we expand the first 1,000 days of life? I was in Guatemala on the day that they signed a compact with the U.S. We need to do more of those, not just for stunting purposes, but so mother and child will be healthy. So if you could talk about that briefly. Last year, neglected tropical diseases caused the loss of 534,000 lives. In 2014, 100 million was focused on those horrible diseases. I held a hearing on it last year. Dr. Peter Hotez testified. I've since read his book, Forgotten People, Forgotten Diseases. It is exploding all over. Schistosomiasis is on a tear, as you know, as well as these other horrible diseases. Worms makes people, particularly women, more likely to contract HIV/AIDS. Yet the 2015 budget cuts it to $86.5 million. Maybe there's other money coming in from a different spigot, but that is a 14% cut for something that is extraordinarily important. On Ebola, you might want to speak to that very quickly and maybe more for the record. I know 5 CDC people arrived in Guinea, but this is different. Doctors Without Borders says this is unprecedented because it's not small, it's not isolated, it seems to be expanding. And finally, something that I think is an easy lift. I've had 2 hearings on this whole emerging problem of infectious-based hydrocephalic disease. Dr. Ben Morf from Harvard sat where you sat, gave riveting testimony on the need for neurosurgeons in Africa and neurologists. Cure International has cured over 5,000 kids in Uganda. I've introduced a bill that I don't know if it's going to pass or not. We've asked you repeatedly, I've asked you if you would look into it. We're talking about $3 million per year to get us involved with brain health in general, but this one is the situation of kids who are dying, horrible deaths from water on the brain. I've seen the kids. I've met the children. I had one of the neurosurgeons testify from Africa. They need more of them, and that's part of the vision, to grow the capacity of neurosurgeons in Africa. 1 in 10 million in all of East Africa. That's appalling.
Thank you, and I just want to thank you for your leadership on all of these global health issues, your chairmanship of that committee, as well as your work from the early 1980s that set a tone for American leadership that I think has borne tremendous results. So thank you very, very much. First, on nutrition, we will be announcing on May 22nd our nutrition policy, this is very important because this is one area where the science and the solutions have advanced dramatically in the last 5 years. And working together with Tony Lake, who leads UNICEF, I'm part of something called the Scaling Up Nutrition, or SUN effort, which is designed to take the 1,000 days approach, targeting pregnant women and young children with supplemental foods that can improve their nutritional status so that they're not stunted through the rest of their lives, forward in dozens of countries where the countries themselves make the first commitment, create the plan, make their own investments, and then we match that. I think you'll see in the policy that we're setting a quantitative target for the number of stunted kids. We will achieve reduction of child stunting country by country. It'll be an integrated policy with our Feed the Future program and our larger global health efforts, and it will be the operational plan that makes real last year's commitment that I made on behalf of the Obama administration at the G8 summit in London to commit nearly $1 billion to nutrition-specific investments over the next 3 years. With respect to NTDs, we'll provide maybe a more detailed answer for the record, but I just want to note that under the Obama administration, we have scaled up significantly the private sector drug contributions from a number of key partners, as well as scaled up their contributions to do the community training of health workers and deployment of health workers. Our approach is now integrated with our child survival effort because there's so much overlap in the countries of greatest need. And I'm confident that while we had to make some tough trade-offs on certain budget lines, investing in the systemic approach to child survival, bringing these drug donations into an integrated supply chain will help us effectively achieve those goals, and we could have more detailed discussion offline. With respect to Ebola, we have been supporting the World Health Organization and the CDC in this effort. We're supporting them in the regional office in Brazzaville as well as in headquarters, providing personal protective equipment to frontline workers so that they're protected from disease themselves, and providing emergency financial support as it's needed. I'm glad that you raise it because it does have really dire potential, and we'll continue to work with it. And on hydrocephalus, I'll look forward to working with you a bit more on that. I understand why it's been difficult, and part of the difficulty is we've been so laser-like focused on community health and efforts to reduce diseases that cause large-scale mortality and morbidity that we haven't had the resource flexibility given the extraordinarily tight budgets. But if there's something we can do to be helpful, I would like to make that commitment to you, and I understand the data that you're citing and the commitment you've shown, and I want to thank you for that.
We go to Mr. Albio Series of New Jersey, the ranking member of the Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I first like to associate myself with the words by my colleague, Ileana Ross-Layton, and I won't bore you with some of my experiences as a young boy. But I do want to talk a little bit about this issue with the tweeter, and I want to know if you still feel that USAID is still the appropriate vehicle to carry out these programs. And quite frankly, what are the potential negative effects on USAID's programs going forward in Cuba and elsewhere? Because we have the issue of Venezuela. So,
well, maybe I could sort of suggest three things. The first is, it's clear that this program, which is directed and mandated by Congress and implemented within pretty tight direction, is a part of our portfolio of activities. And I do want to have a conversation with Congress about how we're managing this, about what the long-term approach ought to be. I do take note that the GAO report that reviewed our management complimented us for making management improvements in how the program is executed. And I note that in countries all around the world, standing up for democratic values, improved governance, anti-corruption, open civil society, access to information is critical to achieving a broad range of goals. That said, we're open to the dialogue you're suggesting, and I'd like to have that. I'd also like to note right now that because Alan Gross was raised earlier, and I just want to be clear about something. Alan should be released by the government. He shouldn't have been arrested in the first place. He should be freed and allowed to return to his family. He's a husband, a father. He's facing health issues. He's had a 50-year career of providing support to vulnerable populations. And we are going to, and the entire U.S. government is working aggressively to secure his release. As you know, it's important for us as an administration to speak with one voice on this, and I and USAID will continue to work with the State Department and under its leadership as they lead the effort to secure his release on a diplomatic basis.
and my last question is regarding Colombia. At a time when they're negotiating with the FARC, we seem to be cutting our assistance to Colombia. Do you feel that's a good message that we're sending?
Well, we are doing everything we can to maintain levels of support throughout the region and throughout the world in an environment where the budget is very, very tight. We've had a top-line reduction in the 150 account overall. We've had a reallocation of resources to make significant security investments and implement the findings of the review that was conducted on security for state and aid personnel. And given that, that's creating significant pressures, and we have less overseas contingency operation resources in the FY15 request. So that's all creating downward pressure. In that context, I think we're doing our best to prioritize Colombia. We recognize how important that is. I visited personally, met with the President, with leaders there in private sector and civil society, and we are embracing new partnerships. We launched a big new effort with Starbucks to reach 25,000 small-scale coffee farmers and to help connect them to a high-value market. And these are specifically farmers in post-FARC affected communities as an effort to kind of get the economy going in precisely those rural areas where we know that peace is tenuous and we want to make sure it sustains. So we're going to do our best, but this is a difficult year budget-wise overall, and I always hope Congress can provide greater resources for America's foreign engagements around the world, because I believe these investments are the front line of our own security, prosperity, and peace.
I'm just concerned that Colombia has been such a staunch ally of ours, and we had success working together, that at the time when they are negotiating, we are cutting. And I don't know if that sends the right message, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Series. We'll go now to Mr. Dana Rohrabacher, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Europe, Eurasia, and Emerging Threats.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Administrator, could you tell us, you're asking what, for $20 billion for your budget this year, is that right?
It's 20.1 billion.
20.1 billion. How much of that is disaster assistance, and how much of that is, let's say, long-term country building aid?
Well, sir, it depends a bit on how we count the accounts, and one of the things we've tried to do is use disaster assistance to support longer-term systemic development. So in the Philippines, we got the energy system and the water system back up and running within a few weeks, and we did that using a combination of disaster funds and development assistance. But in general, our humanitarian accounts are called IDA, International Disaster Assistance, Food for Peace, and a number of other accounts, and they probably total maybe $4 billion, $3 to $4 billion in total, depending on which accounts you look at.
20% would be disaster assistance of what you're asking for in the budget.
I wouldn't state it that way, but we could come back and be precise about the answers. But yes, it's a portion of the $20 billion.
Yeah, let me just say that I believe that the American people we're not stingy people, and we have a heart for people who are suffering anywhere in the world. And certainly when people go through natural disasters or even disasters that are caused by human action, lending a helping hand to get over that emergency is certainly something that none of us, and I think the American people would oppose, the American people would support, even though we are $500 billion in the red every year. Our overall budget, we're spending $500 billion more, so every cent that we're spending, we're, in a way, much of that's in borrowed money from somebody else in order to give it to somebody else. But for disaster assistance, that's understandable. Long-term country building aid, however, at a time when we are borrowing this money for have our own economy survive, does not make as much sense to me, or I believe to the American people. And often it's done in a way that is just absolutely atrocious, and I would like to challenge one aspect of that today, and that is the money that we plan, and I see that the administration is planning to provide, at least you're requesting, $882 million in aid for Pakistan. And let me just note that Pakistan arrested and is still holding and brutalizing Dr. Afridi, who helped us identify and locate Osama bin Laden, who was responsible for slaughtering 3,000 Americans. I consider his arrest and his continued incarceration to be a hostile act by Pakistan against the United States, and I don't see how anybody else could think of it as anything else. But worse than that, we have apparently since 9/11, we've given Pakistan over $25 billion, and of that, $17 billion have gone to Pakistan's security services, which we know now have been in cahoots with terrorists who murder Americans. And even worse, perhaps, we have been providing these billions of dollars to Pakistan's security services, and they are using billions of dollars of military equipment that we've been giving them in order to conduct a genocidal campaign against the people of Baluchistan and the Sindhis of Pakistan as well. How can we justify providing more aid for a country like Pakistan that is using our aid, our military aid, to murder in great number the people of Baluchistan and the repression of the Sindhi people?
Sir, let me just come back to our budget. You know, if we have about $3 billion for natural disasters, the majority of the remainder is spent in child survival, HIV/AIDS and treatment for AIDS patients, food and hunger, including the President's Feed the Future program, our education effort, which specifically focuses on girls and getting girls a basic education in early years, and water, and getting water to people who otherwise suffer without. And for each of those areas, we have strategies, goals, metrics, we measure outcomes, and I believe we can speak about the effectiveness both in terms of achieving those objectives and creating the basis of stability and opportunity so that we live in a more peaceful world because of this effort.
Well,
with respect to Pakistan in particular,
the only back on that would be that we are borrowing the money from other people in order to achieve very fine objectives like that. And perhaps in the past we could afford to be benevolent towards other souls that are not in an emergency situation, but at least helping some people out. We could be benevolent and think borrowing the money is okay. Perhaps we've reached a point now that it threatens our whole economy. Pardon me for interrupting.
Sure. And with respect to Pakistan, the U.S. aid program focuses in 5 sectors: in health, education, agriculture, a stabilization program in the FATA that has built schools and community clinics and road infrastructure, and energy and electricity. And in each of those areas, in energy, we put 1,300 megawatts on the grid. We believe those efforts are building, are helping to move communities towards, a better perspective about how to engage in the world, are giving people who otherwise wouldn't have opportunity, basic opportunity. And our goal, as is our goal for all of our efforts everywhere around the world, is to succeed at having local capacity replace external assistance over time.
We're putting our money, we're putting our money into those wonderful goals. They put their money into murdering their own people and helping terrorists kill American troops. Thank you very much.
We go now to Mr. Ted Deutsch of Florida, ranking member on the subcommittee on Middle East and North Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Shah, for being here today. Let me join my colleagues in commending you for the work that you've done to make USAID more efficient and more transparent over the years, and the tremendous work that's been done promoting American interests around the world. The United States gives foreign aid not because we like one country or another. We do it to ensure stability, equality, rule of law, food security, global health, all the things that have a direct impact on our own security, and I commend you for your efforts. I'd like to follow up on an exchange that I had last year with Assistant Administrator Lindborg, who's doing fantastic work in an incredibly challenging region, on the branding of USAID in Syria. At the time, we were seeing a stream of press reports that the Syrian people have no idea that the United States is the largest provider of aid. We heard reports that in UN refugee camps there were flags of other countries on the tents, on the blankets, but hardly any U.S. flags at all. I understand the risk that branding inside Syria places on aid workers. I'm sensitive to that. But I do believe that it's appropriate in refugee camps. Ms. Lindborg gave us a number of instances of U.S. branding, including plastic sheeting, nutritional biscuits, and also discussed efforts to broadcast on Arab media into Syria. I wonder if you could give us an update on efforts to let the Syrian people know that we are there and that we are helping.
Well, thank you, sir. And I think we've tried to do our best to make sure that the work that we are doing and the partners who are conducting this work are appreciated for America's generosity and for the results they're achieving. And we've tried to balance that with some of the very specific risks that some of our partners, in particular Syrian-American doctors in medical facilities, for example, face because we know that they've been targeted by the regime. So with that, a few examples would be, as we're moving to providing these voucher and debit cards to refugee families that are registered in Jordan and Lebanon and Turkey, those are branded. And I noted earlier for the chairman that Nancy Lindborg just sat with a group of women in Amman who said, this represents our dignity in an environment where we've lost our homes, we've lost our husbands, we've lost our assets, our kids are not in school, and thank you to the American people. In other contexts, as Nancy noted—
I'm sorry, Dr. Shaw, they're branded. How are they branded? What do they say?
They have a USAID brand on them, and from the American people, which is part of our branding effort, which has been actually studied and is quite effective and is sometimes represented in both local language and our own. There are anytime we provide sort of cash assistance or food items or non-food items like the plastic sheeting, those things are branded and identified. We have expanded over the last few years efforts to use broadcasting and other tools to help people see what we're doing and also to kind of learn what needs are so that we're both projecting an American image that's more effective from a public diplomacy perspective and, frankly, gathering information that helps us improve our response, communities in need or changes in that context. And in general, I think it's now recognized that America provides a lot of critically needed and life-saving humanitarian assistance in Syria and certainly in the communities I've been with in Amman, in Lebanon, in Turkey.
Great, I appreciate that, and I hope that I hope the issue that we heard about last time, that there are tents that clearly display flags of the other countries who are helping to a much lesser extent than the United States, that those now include American flags as well. Let me just move on to one other issue in my remaining time. I want to commend the good work of the American Schools and Hospitals Abroad program, which has helped American organizations start and maintain programs around the world. In the past few years, the administration has usually recommended a level of around $15 million in their budget. Congress has typically appropriated around $23 million. The FY2015 budget request for this program has been reduced again, and it would be helpful if you could just walk us through the reasoning for this continued reduction in what is a successful program, at least to my understanding.
Well, thank you. And again, we really respect the American Schools and Hospital Abroad effort. ASHA has, since 1961, provided almost $1 billion in health and education assistance to more than 300 organizations, continues to be a critical vehicle for us, and we hosted their international conference just a week or two ago here in Washington, D.C. We know we reach more than 10,000 students and health professionals every year with this effort. We have had to make tough budget determinations, especially because of the dire humanitarian consequences of what's happening around the world right now and the downward pressure on the overall account that comes from both the budget agreement, the control levels, and the efforts to make the security investments to implement the PRB report. So, this is one of those tough trade-offs. We recognize how important this effort is, and I think these are important efforts. We've just had to make very, very difficult decisions. But this is a program that I respect and value, and I think over time we will absolutely sustain.
I thank you, and just, Mr. Chairman, I just point out that Dr. Shah, I appreciate the trade-offs that have to be made. I would just ask, as you consider the merits of this program relative to the relatively small investment that's being made in it, that analysis ultimately be a determining factor as you go forward. And I thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We go to Mr. Steve Shabbat of Ohio, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as we continue to see government spending grow across the board, it's critical that we ensure that taxpayers are not being wasted on ineffective assistance programs or end up in the hands of corrupt governments or any other organizations like that. So, Administrator Shah, I have a few questions. In February, I had the opportunity to visit the Philippines with Chairman Royce and a number of other members of this committee in order to assess the devastation which was caused by Typhoon Haiyan. While there, we learned that USAID is using geolocators to track precisely where assistance is being delivered and by whom. It was indicated that these locators are being used in order to help reduce the overlap of aid. How effective has this method been in the typhoon-hit areas, and at the same time, has this technology been used in other countries, and if so, where, and what are the cost benefits of implementing this type of tracking method?
Thank you, sir. I don't have the data to speak to the cost benefit of that specific strategy at this point, but one of the efforts we've made over...
Could you provide that when it's available?
Absolutely. One of the things we've done over the last few years is to really work hard to improve coordination and our lead role in coordination with the UN and with a range of other partners. That's actually why I went out to co-chair with Secretary Hagel the ASEAN Defense Ministers Ministerial on Humanitarian Assistance, because often coordination is about coordinating with civilian and military actors, as we saw during Typhoon Haiyan. And this is one technology. We've used others as well to help make sure that we're kind of coordinated and swift and aggressive in how we respond to things, and that we have data back so we know who's receiving aid and where there are pockets of need in the midst of a crisis where data is often difficult to come by.
Thank you. So if you could provide that cost-benefit information, I'd appreciate that. My next question, the Asia-Pacific Subcommittee, which I have the honor to chair, did quite a bit of work regarding Cambodia last year in the run-up to elections, which not surprisingly, we believe were vote-rigged and overall unfair elections. At the time, I introduced legislation calling for more accountable foreign assistance for Cambodia. That legislation stated that if the elections were not deemed free or fair, Cambodia should be ineligible for direct U.S. assistance to support its military and police, and that the State Department and USAID should jointly reassess and reduce, if appropriate, assistance for Cambodia. The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2014 contained restrictions on aid to Cambodia due to its human rights situation, which has not improved. Has USAID begun the process of reassessing assistance to Cambodia? And also, would you please describe what U.S. assistance in Cambodia has actually achieved, and which areas aid has been least effective, and how have the actions of Hun Sen's regime impacted the effectiveness of U.S. aid and the foreign assistance from other countries as well, if you know?
Well, thank you, sir. I say just on the Asia-Pacific in general, this has been as part of the President's direction to pivot to the region. We have, despite all the difficult trade-offs we have made, we have had modest increases in budgets through that region, and in aggregate for Asia and the Pacific. With respect to Cambodia in particular, the strategic direction we've taken, and we appreciate the guidance that you've provided, has been to increase support for democracy programs, for civil society, for efforts to improve governance. And the FY2015 request includes more than $12 million for democracy, governance, civil society, and transparency efforts inside of Cambodia. And
how much resistance from Hun Sen's regime do you get on that sort of assistance?
Well, you know, we support civil society based on a set of principles that we believe, as part of partnering with America, we should be engaging with all parts of society and not exclusively and just the government. So, you know, these are open programs. They're notified as we've discussed, and we get from time to time some degree of comment, but nevertheless, we have support for civil society as one of our core values in our programs around the world. I'll say with respect to effectiveness, these efforts have in the past directly engaged over 22,000 young Cambodians and indirectly reached tens of thousands more, and they do provide support for them to document what happens during elections, to mobilize young people and stand up for a set of values about open society, and we will continue to provide that support should Congress provide the resources.
Thank you. My time's expired.
Thank you. We go to Mr. David Cicilline of Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Shaw, for joining us today. And I want to begin by complimenting you on your powerful and very moving words at the National Prayer Breakfast. You obviously were not instructed not to ever upstage your boss, but you did. So thank you for that. And thank you to you and your excellent team at USAID for the work that you're doing in particularly challenging times and often in the face of diminishing resources. We were also very proud to welcome you to Rhode Island. I want to thank you for your visit last year to Adizia, the producer of Plumpy Nut and related nutritional products, and I'm really pleased that you were able to see firsthand how Adizia is using innovation to treat and prevent malnutrition for the world's most vulnerable children and creating good jobs in my home state to do it. And they are currently drawing up plans for a new, larger facility in Rhode Island that they hope can help them reach over 2 million children each year worldwide. And I know that they would welcome your return to Rhode Island to help them cut the ribbon in that facility next year. I want to acknowledge also USAID's efforts to ensure inclusive development, especially through the protection of human rights of LGBT individuals. And I know the recently appointed senior LGBT coordinator for USAID started a few weeks ago, and I look forward to hearing about the great things he will do moving forward and look forward to working with him. As you know, this is an especially important issue right now, as Uganda and Nigeria have both recently passed severely discriminatory anti-LGBT laws, which could significantly hamper our public health efforts. Just this past week, there were press reports of a police raid on a U.S.-funded HIV project, and reaching key communities is a critical component, obviously, to reducing the transmission of HIV and creating an AIDS-free generation worldwide. So I have 3 questions which I'd like to go through quickly and then give you an opportunity to answer them. First is, would you talk a little bit about what USAID is doing to ensure that LGBT individuals continue to have access to PEPFAR's life-saving interventions and medications, as well as other global health programs? Second, in 2010, USAID launched a procurement reform initiative that promised to increase the number of contract awards to small businesses and NGOs, to streamline procurement processes, to provide more funds directly to host countries, and to ensure that the products being purchased are of the highest quality. Could you talk about the progress that's being made on these initiatives? And finally, how does USAID work with intergovernmental organizations and NGOs worldwide to combat the horrific, very serious problem of gender-based violence, particularly against very young children and girls?
Well, thank you, Congressman, for your unwavering and incredible support. I love remembering what those employees at Adizia told me, which was upon learning that their work and their products were reaching families throughout Syria and helping women and children, they were just so proud to be part of America's engagement in the world. And those are great new jobs in that community. So thank you for having me out there. With respect to Uganda, I very much appreciate your comments. These retrogressive laws that have been passed have a chilling effect on the LGBT community access to care. And quite simply put, we are not going to achieve our goals of an AIDS-free generation if they are allowed to hamper the effort for our program beneficiaries to receive services in an environment that is safe, that is open, that respects their dignity, and that understands that this is a critical point of access to critically needed and life-saving health care. So we are currently undergoing a review of all of our Uganda assistance programs and how to best engage. We have made some adaptations already to programs based on particular organizations and their behavior with respect to all of this. I have talked to my counterparts in the UK and other European capitals, so we have a coordinated response that carries more effort, force, as we talk through how we're going to deal with the consequences of this. But our commitment is to make sure that we're able to reach the LGBT community in Uganda with basic services for health and HIV/AIDS, and that we are, working to, as Secretary Kerry has noted, work to highlight how regressive and repressive this law is. With respect to small businesses and NGOs, I'm proud to report that over 4 years we have nearly doubled our commitment to new partners and NGOs in particular. The percentage of funds used to be 9% going to those partners is now 18%. With respect to small businesses, we get a score every year, a grade, and when I started it was an F, and then it went to an A. I think it came down to a B, and we're hopeful for another A, but I will knock on wood and not commit to that until the scoring comes out this year. But our teams have been, the reason we pursue this effort is we believe we should have a diversified base of partners, that all of our partners should have access to the opportunity to take this mission forward, and that small businesses, NGOs, civil society often can add a lot of value at a very efficient price point, and so we want to engage that community effectively. And finally, on NGOs and gender-based violence, I was in Eastern Congo a few months ago, and the use of rape as a commonplace practice of conflict and war in that environment is just devastating to interact with. And to meet young girls and young boys who have been a part of this is just, it's just extraordinarily difficult. I'm very proud of our teams that have not just had targeted gender-based violence programs to reach survivors and to protect them, to make sure they get fistula repair operations and other critically needed and specialized services. And this is happening, in difficult contexts. But also to really look at the broad range of what we do on humanitarian efforts, on agriculture programs, on health programs, and ensure that we're focusing on reaching girls, protecting girls, giving girls an opportunity, because we know that in many of these parts of the world, doing that will change the character and sufficiency and prosperity of society over time. And every bit of effort we can make, which, while by its definition is not enough, I think is an important manifestation of America's values.
Absolutely. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
We go now to Judge Ted Poe, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Terrorism, Nonproliferation, and Trade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Shaw, it's good to see you again. Thank you for what you do. I want to talk about money, taxpayer money that is spent through the State Department, specifically then through USAID. When Americans think of foreign aid, they think of all the money that the State Department spends. But there is a State Department budget, and then there is a foreign assistance money that goes to foreign countries. But let's start with the State Department and why so many, including me, people are frustrated about American money. The State Department, I understand, has an arts division that buys art for its embassies. This is a $1 million stack of bricks, in my opinion. I know nothing about art. That is at the London embassy that taxpayers spent. The State Department paid for it, and we spent it on ourselves at the London embassy. It's $1 million. That's, to me, that's quite a bit of money. Recently, the State Department has decided to purchase this camel and send it to Islamabad and put it in the American embassy in Islamabad. This is about $400,000, and the embassy, State Department said, well, it could have been more, but we got a discount. And so we got the camel, the stack of bricks. I understand that's not foreign assistance, but that's money that goes to the State Department, and a little concerning that we would spend American money that way. If we want art in our embassies, why don't we get school kids to make paint pictures that we could put in all of our embassies throughout the world? I think our school kids could do that. It would be better. Anyway, so let's narrow it down to foreign assistance. Recently, the Associated Press has reported that the State Department cannot account for about $6 billion over a period of years. Some of that money is foreign assistance. Some of it's not foreign assistance. It would be security assistance. But for the record, I'd like to put the Associated Press article into the record, Mr.
Without
Chairman.
objection.
Not sure where all the money came from or was what accounts, but it's about $6 billion that the State Department says, well, we just can't find it, which is a little concerning as well. That's according to a report that the Office of Inspector General did in the State Department. And that frustrates me as a member of Congress. It frustrates citizens, too. $6 billion, we're talking about real money, even for the federal government. Which leads me to the comment I'd like to get from you. Accountability is, to me, very important. How we spend taxpayer money. Representative Connolly and myself have introduced legislation, the Foreign Aid Transparency and Accountability Act, which basically says when we give foreign assistance, we need to be able to measure if it's working or not working. Programs that work, let's maybe keep them. Programs that not working, let's get rid of them. And as you know, many non-government organizations support the legislation, even organizations that would sort of be audited by the State Department or by USAID support a review, an audit, is what I call it, of foreign assistance overseas. I personally think that would bring some credibility to how we spend our money. Maybe we shouldn't be buying art. I know that's not foreign assistance, but and you've commented in the past on this specific piece of legislation. So from your point of view, as the administrator of USAID, talking about specific foreign assistance, not talking about other State Department money, do you think if we eliminate the security portion of it and just evaluate at this time foreign assistance, security, that's a different issue. Weigh in on that for me, if you would. Then I have one other question.
As we've discussed before, and I very much appreciate your comments on evaluation and monitoring, we have taken the precepts that underlie the legislation and actually implemented them. So over the last 4 years, we've put out a new evaluation policy. We've trained 460 of our staff. We have increased the number of evaluations that we do and publish every year from about 73 to, in this last year, 234. And the quality of those evaluations, which we now track and measure, has also gone up significantly to be consistent with our new policy.
I'm running out of time, Dr. Shaw, excuse me. I have some questions that I'll submit for the record, and I know since you always respond, I appreciate that. And one last question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. I understand that we give foreign assistance to Armenia and Belarus. Those two countries specifically voted against the United States in the UN. They agreed with basically the invasion, in my opinion, of the Russians into Crimea. Maybe we should reevaluate giving money to countries that support Russian invasion. Just a thought, and I'll submit the questions, Mr. Chairman, for the record for Dr. Shaw.